Donald Trump has held a grudge against Vladimir Zelensky since that moment. He's hated him, and it has nothing to do with Ukraine, Russia, geopolitics. It just has to do with Donald Trump finally settling a score.
I'm joined now by Bill Browder, who is the head of the Global Magnitsky Justice Campaign and an anti-Russian corruption campaigner. Bill Browder, hello. Welcome to Times Radio.
Great to be here.
Good to have you on. Look, that quote from Russia saying that this move could push the Kyiv regime to a peace process. Did we know that Russia wanted a peace process? That's new, isn't it?
Russia is the one who has invaded. Putin has invaded Ukraine 3 years ago. It's absolutely at their discretion whether they want to move forward or move backwards, whether they want to fire or stop firing. And so it's kind of, we're living in this sort of Alice in Wonderland world where they're coming up with these crazy statements. It's totally within Putin's remit to just stop fighting, to stop killing, to stop bombing. And so for them to say, oh, this is going to push Ukraine towards a peace process, all Ukraine is doing right now, and all they've ever been doing, is defending themselves from an onslaught by Russia. And so it's all very interesting and amazing that they're able to sort of twist around these words, the peace process, to make it sound like they're the reasonable ones, and the Ukrainians are somehow being unreasonable in this situation.
What do you think of the stance being taken by America towards Ukraine, obviously trying to push them towards making concessions because they won't be able to afford not to?
Well, what's happening right now is not pushing them towards making concessions. They're pushing them towards a surrender. They want Ukraine to surrender. And we have not seen Donald Trump browbeating Vladimir Putin. We've not seen Donald Trump threatening Vladimir Putin with anything. All we see him doing is going after the victim and saying to the victim, it's time for you now to surrender. We don't want to be distracted. We don't want to support you. And at the same time as he's doing that, he's giving all sorts of gifts to Vladimir Putin. He's saying, you can set up your embassy in Washington again properly. We're going to probably lift sanctions. We want to invite you back into the G7, all sorts of other things like that. Putin has not done anything to in any way earn this goodwill or these gifts from America. And I would say that Ukraine has done nothing to earn all this punishment coming from America. And it's, as the previous speaker said, the punishment is life and death for the Ukrainians. If America cuts off, and as America has cut off military aid for Ukraine, more people will die in Ukraine as a result of that. And it's really a heartbreaking moment in this whole terrible story.
In your best understanding, why do you think this is the position that Donald Trump has adopted towards Ukraine? What is he hoping to achieve, and why does he feel it's the right course of action?
Well, I think that it doesn't have anything to do with the war or geopolitics. I think it comes right back to Donald Trump personally. I think he's really mad at Vladimir Zelensky. Back in 2017, I believe, he wanted to have Zelensky manufacture a bunch of fake information about Hunter Biden, President Biden's son, and Zelensky was not keen to do that. He didn't want to get involved in this ugly ordeal, and so in retaliation, Trump then withheld the military aid for Ukraine, and if you remember, that was the basis for which Donald Trump was impeached. He was impeached twice. That was the first impeachment. And so Donald Trump has held a grudge against Vladimir Zelensky since that moment. He's hated him. And it has nothing to do with Ukraine, Russia, geopolitics. It just has to do with Donald Trump finally settling a score. And I think that's as simple as that, why he's doing this.
You really do think it's that petty?
I do. And everything else that he's done indicates that that's the kind of guy he is.
Listeners might be surprised to learn that Europe has hundreds of billions of frozen Russian assets. What's stopping them from giving that money to Ukraine right now?
Well, so this is one of the things that I've been working on since the start of the war. So about a week after the war started, the Western allies froze $300 billion of Russian government central bank reserves. Most of that money is in Europe and the UK. Only a very small fraction is in the United States. And the argument I've always made is that Russia launched this unprovoked war of aggression against Ukraine. And so it was a decision of the Russian government, unprovoked. The damage that they've done at this point is probably between 500 billion and $1 trillion. And we have custody of this money. This money should be confiscated. And what has prevented the money from being confiscated is just political will. All sorts of politicians in different countries in Europe and here were somehow hoping that this war would end, that the issues would go away, that they wouldn't have to take this measure. And here we are today, where the United States has withdrawn military aid for Ukraine. The United States is responsible for about 40% of all military aid for Ukraine, maybe a little bit more. And we're going to have to fill up the gap. Otherwise, Ukraine is going to fall. And therefore, whatever misgivings and bureaucracy and risk aversion our leaders have had, there's two ways we can do this. Either the taxpayer, the British taxpayer, can fill in the American gap, or Putin can. And I think it makes a lot more sense for Putin to pay for this than the UK taxpayers.
Earlier this week, Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, was talking about providing to Ukraine the proceeds, basically the proceeds that have been made from frozen Russian assets, but said the process of transferring the assets themselves was incredibly complicated, much as it might be an aspiration. Is he wrong? Could it just be done tomorrow?
It could be done tomorrow. It should be done tomorrow. There's nothing complicated about it. And I've been through many of these processes before where all advisors and permanent civil servants all throw up their hands and say this is complicated. But at the end of the day, things get done when leaders step in. And this is a moment of really desperate need for leadership. Keir Starmer has done a great job at the White House, did a great job at Lancaster House, hosting all the different heads of state. And this is the moment he should step up and do this job.
Sure. Bill Browder, thanks very much indeed. Very good to speak to you. Now, Jeremy Griffin, the Times' executive editor, is here. He's going to be delving into some of the best of the Times you might have missed. Hello, Jeremy.
Hi, Hugo.
What have you got for us?
Well, massive interest in anything and everything related to Ukraine and President Trump today. The theme is dominating the list of best performing articles on thetimes.com and our digital app so far. There's a lot to get one's head around. So just to give you a summary of the sort of coverage you can absorb, if you are a subscriber to the Times and the Sunday Times, we're running a live file at the top of the site at the moment. This is being updated every few minutes with breaking news, and there's a lot of it, reaction to Trump's suspension of military aid and analysis. You'll also find news there of the latest Russian drone attack in the southern Ukrainian city of Odessa. We have some analysis filed overnight by Alistair Dorber, our Washington correspondent, on what that pause in aid means for Ukraine. There's more to come on that theme soon as well from Larissa Brown, the Times defence editor, who will show us what it means in terms of Ukraine's battlefield inventory.
Now, the president of the European Commission has said that Europe needs a massive surge in defence after the US President Donald Trump paused military aid to Ukraine. Speaking in Brussels this morning, Ursula von der Leyen said that the EU would propose to give member states more fiscal space for defence investments as part of her Rearm Europe plan, which she says could mobilise close to 800 billion euros. Here she is speaking earlier.
We are in an era of rearmament. And Europe is ready to massively boost its defence spending, both to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
Well, I'm joined now by Jack Parrock, who's an EU correspondent based in Brussels. Jack, good morning.
Hi, Hugo. Yeah, really interesting. Era of rearmament, she's saying. It's a big sort of shift in the thinking of the European Union.
Yeah, massively. So what is actually her plan, and will it actually work?
Yeah, important. The first thing to say is that it's like a proposal right now. This is a proposal that the European Commission tables. This doesn't immediately come into law. This isn't exactly how potentially this will work. This is what leaders on Thursday, EU leaders, are coming to Brussels to talk about. Now, within the plan, there's sort of three main things. One is that EU countries will be allowed to increase their defence spending, their defence budgets, without triggering EU mechanisms that support state sponsorship of companies or different plans. The other thing she says is that the European Commission will take on, she proposes 150 billion euros of loans, so it can use its good rating on international markets to shoulder the debt collectively and then get schemes where EU countries can collectively buy things like anti-drone systems, drones, missile defences, anti-missile defences, all of these things that they've also been giving to Ukraine over the last 3 years, and that instead of buying them individually, they can pool together and use them to protect certain geographical areas. Potentially, all of the details of that aren't particularly clear. And the other thing that she puts in the proposal is that countries can redirect money that is supposed to be used for leveling the playing field in the European Union. So rich countries essentially give money that support poorer countries to bring them up and make them more equal economically. They're called the cohesion funds, always a hotly disputed part of the EU budget. And what she's saying is that potentially some of those cohesion funds could be used for defense spending. That is a big shift in thinking.
I mean, to what extent is this, this new concern about boosting European defence spending a northern European concern? Because I mean, the sort of contributions to NATO, for example, of southern European states, Italy, Spain, Portugal, have always been well below those who are perhaps more, well, geographically adjacent with Russia, we should say. Is everybody on board? Is everybody on the same page here?
I think there is a general sense, and this is what von der Leyen is sort of hinting towards, this zeitgeist that actually there needs to do more. And those southern European countries that you mentioned, who've lagged far behind on defense spending, are accusing of doing so. I mean, this is almost exactly what Donald Trump is saying. And to be fair, all US presidents before, so Obama and Biden, all of them have bemoaned the lack of spending of big economies in Europe's south, saying that essentially they're resting on allowing the United States to protect their defense requirements as part of NATO rather than spending their own money. And maybe this is sort of what Trump's trying to do in this, in some sense, is to push these European countries to spend more. Whether they get on board with this and whether Ursula von der Leyen's plan is the thing that does it, that's something we'll see. As I say, the leaders are coming specifically to talk about defence to Brussels, a special summit on Thursday, and they'll look into this. But there are also countries that are entirely against this and do have the potential to veto it. Countries like Hungary, who are completely in line with Donald Trump's vision for Ukraine, that they need to find some sort of peace plan, whether Ukraine is involved in that, whether the Europeans are involved in that in any way. They don't want to rearm. The Slovaks as well, they don't want to rearm in any sense. And they want to see what Trump wants, which is, an end of supplying Ukraine with weapons, and what they see would be the end to the war then.
Is there still any talk of some sort of combined EU army? I know there used to be.
Well, this is what triggers people a lot in this situation. When someone like von der Leyen makes these kind of proposals, people start talking about an EU army and people get very concerned about that. That was a big concern for people that supported Brexit and wanted the UK out. Now, whether the UK joins with some of these arms plans or whether purchasing programs are extended outside of the European Union, that's something that could be looked at here. I suppose right now, like I said, the zeitgeist is that von der Leyen knows that European countries and European citizens are very concerned about what's happened with Trump ending the support to Ukraine. And therefore, they feel there is significant support in the electorates of the European Union for continuing to support Ukraine, and therefore they can capitalize on that to rearm. At the moment, this is no proposal for EU army, but when you're talking about joint procurement of weapons, of financial systems to get more weapons, then these are the steps that lead to those discussions about what an EU army would potentially look like.
Jack Parrock, thank you very much indeed. And Jack is an EU reporter based in Brussels. Good to speak to you.